Remember, when we're learning about rave analysis method, it's about triggering the person's inner connection to their energy of the vehicle. So it's not about how much you know. It's not about trying to get all the details in there. It's through the introduction, definition, transition, openness, and then profile. Those 5 different ways that we connect the client to their body graph to help remind them and realign them to their individual truth. This is the inner connection to the energy of the vehicle. That's our task. So at this juncture, you are your own authority. You will have been in this material for over 3.5 years. If you still blame other people for mistakes, or you're still making decisions that are leading you to frustration, anger, bitterness, or disappointment, take a good look at yourself, because this is the process of coming to grips with what it is to be you. And if you're doing readings from a place of bitterness, anger, frustration, or disappointment, it's not going to help anybody. Ross says, if you can make a reliable decision, it means you don't carry baggage as you enter into things. Not carrying doubts and concerns, a reliable decision opens you up to an experience completely. And not only that, in being able to know how to make a reliable decision and finding inner authority in yourself, you have the capacity to enter into everything correctly. It's not like honoring authority is threatening to us. It's about knowing where within us we can feel whole, comfortable, and safe. When you look at yourself, do the very best you can to look at your parents. Not everybody can. Unfortunately, because it is one of the most extraordinary things to see, is the nature of conditioning that brought you into your life. I'm going to stop right there for a moment. This is not to continue the victimization process. We know that a 5th line in their, he's a 5-1, in their process, my husband's a 5-1, I've seen it, will get incredibly paranoid and victimized when they're not operating in alignment, just shutting down and shutting people out. So when you watch, as an example, Roz continuing process his quote here, look at your parents, because the moment that somebody is in your life during those first 7 years of life, what they are doing is establishing a conditioned authority in you. This business about conditioning, giving authority, this is not just about parents. It goes on moment by moment, day by day, right now. So right now, you are your own authority. You can make these decisions. If something doesn't feel right inside, don't do it. Allow yourself to be your own authority. Allow others to be their own authority. And as we go through the mechanics of the reading, remember, you're learning a framework to give the board an assignment. It's an exam. What you do after this is up to you. You can do your own style, your own delivery mechanism, your own way of doing this work. Nobody's going to sit there and go, you're not doing that right, once you're off and flying on your own. You're going to do you, whatever your version is. That's true. So notice in the title, we see the mechanics of a reading. What this means is that the reading, what they're looking for is that it has to be well organized. So I had a student come through who wanted to do their own thing. And unfortunately, when it came to getting the exam passed, that particular format wasn't going to cut it. So it's my job to make sure that you do the format, structure, framework to the letter. Not that you do your creative own thing in this exam to prove that you have something that's unique and different and this is what you're going to do out there. Sorry. Okay, just pass the exam and then go do your fun stuff. Okay, so you can definitely use the poetry of keynoting, but please stick to the framework. You're going to do yourself a much better job getting past, and you'll make your life easier, mine too, and everybody else's as well. It is what it is. So the reading is well organized. It follows the energy of the body graph. If you can't follow the energy from pressure to throat, then we've got to go back to the drawing board. I trust that all of you know how to do this, meaning speaking to the nature of this bioenergetic inheritance of the intelligence from the body and the mind, or the form and the personality, so that the way that it's organized in the reading actually reflects how the mechanics of this particular chart functions. And you know, everybody's very different because we have different planetary activations in different sections of the body graph. So pressure, awareness, expression, do recall those. It's most important. Within streams of energy, prioritizing through the planetary activations that are dominant or most important. So in a well-organized and well-presented reading, it's important that the verbal manifestation of the design should paint a picture of what you're actually analyzing. If I close my eyes and I listen to your keynoting, I should be able to see that picture of the body graph. If I don't, then you're doing it wrong, as in it's not going to pass, because they're going to be really stickler. That's why you'll hear me get real strict in these. We don't want to misspeak. If you hear Lavina misspeak, please do let me know, because I don't want to do it either. And, you know, brain stuff going on. Sometimes I do. So verbal analyzation, the design is your job as an analyst to get right when it comes to the preciseness of the keynoting of the language. And if you don't, well, like I mentioned, I've seen them pass two different versions, super simple and super detailed. So as long as it's well organized, well presented, that is part of it, as in good bedside manner, or respecting the client, having compassion, not being so rude or crude that it doesn't get the message across, you know, or too fluffy and light where you're just glossing over any like really challenging detriments in there. If you just go over surface, I wouldn't be necessarily happy if I was on the receiving end, and you're missing out. Like as an example over here, you're missing out on a pain point that somebody might really appreciate knowing what to do about. You know, they'll go, wow, how did they know that about me? So living out this energetic design and the perception, your perception as an analyst of the energetic and the alignment of the energetic, you're literally speaking the keynotes of somebody's principle of awakeness. And not everybody is going to necessarily resonate with it right away. And that's why you want to make sure that you balance it with the openness and, you know, the pain points and the suffering of the not self and all of that stuff. Because the living it out, the alignment itself, after they leave, they are going to have to do the work. You can't do it for them. So your job is looking, seeing, analyzing, perceiving, translating. Okay, translating. Organize the reading around their unique design, the unique reflection of the energetics within the context of this person's human design. And as you go through all of the exercises that are designed to walk you through step by step, creating your final exam, you're going to discover your own way and style for yourself. It's something that emerges as you do the work every single session that you do through the practice and the experience of expressing what we're doing, which is reading a chart. Don't get too up in your head about it. You literally read, like you read the activations. I don't know how to explain it. You read the activations, okay? But remember to synthesize. That's all, okay? You don't have to be perfect. There is no such thing as a perfect reading. That's a false expectation. I've got to prove how great I am to my teacher that I've been paying attention. No. Just demonstrate your competence in presenting the human design system to a client through their chart. That's all. So it's 5 parts of a reading: introduction, definition, transition, openness, and profile. You speak to the nature of the profile throughout, as in, you're not pointing at it and saying, you are a 5-1 right off the bat. No, but you do talk about what it means to be, you're speaking to a personality that is 5 who wants the foundation of things, right? This is analysis when we're doing exercise, when we're doing our practice, because this is our practice. You pass your exam and you open up a practice. You're going to practice for the rest of your life. It's not a reflection on you, whether or not that client is able to follow their own authority or even understands what it is that you're talking about. Because remember, everybody's different. They got a brain that's really dumbed down because they're homogenizing themselves through food. They're not able to cognate or perceive, but maybe you get a tiny glimmer of understanding. You're planting seeds. That's enough. Okay. If they're in your life, if they're there with you, if they're paying you, remember there has to be an energy exchange. You go out there and try to push your services. Let me do all this free work for you, and you don't get any rewards in return. Did you initiate rather than waiting for recognition, formal invitation, and emotional clarity, you know? So you're learning a skill set in context with every chart that you work with. So how do we present this information to other people? First thing, meet them where they're at. If you don't meet them where they're at, you're going to lose them. Either you're too detailed and they're too beginners, so you don't meet where they're at, or they're very self-studied and you're going way surface and you're not meeting them where they are at. So you have to have some kind of context. What I usually do is I ask them, what classes have you taken? What readings have you taken? I want some backstory before I even prepare a presentation or meet with them. Recently, the last week, I've had two different analysts, one for a foundation, one for an incarnation cross. Two of my students come to me for readings. Obviously, I already know some of their backstory, so I don't have to go into that. However, I'm still going to ask them, why are you getting a reading now? If they know. Oh, I just want to hear it from you. Okay, that's fine. Oh, I really want a template so that I know how to do this work for myself. That's a different story. Then obviously I'm going to help make a presentation that shows and explains how I do it and how they might like to do it, depending on the level that person is at that they're working with. So this is one of your primary responsibilities. Because if in the beginning, introducing them to the subject of their chart is going to bore them to tears and waste precious time and valuable energy, you're not doing the right work for that client, right? So when you're doing it for the board, you want to make sure that you're doing an analysis as if, again, literally, you cannot know this person. Don't turn in an exam of somebody that you know. Don't weave in a bunch of stuff that makes it look like you know them. They'll kick it back. Seen it happen. They'll warn you, you know. Second thing is make sure that you're meeting them where they are at. And for the exam, it's somebody who's brand new. They've never had a reading before. Okay, so you make that assumption in a simple, direct way. Tell them what you're going to tell them. You give them an intro paragraph, not living your design as an awakening experience. Please don't make this mistake. Okay, this is not living your design. This is an orientation, introduction to their chart, an idea of what we're going to be doing here today. How is it going to go? What kind of thing is going to happen? What is expected of them? How can they relate to it? And how you're going to relate it to them. So as an example, their first line, you might mention something like, I know you want a solid foundation in this. I can see that you're going to resonate a lot with the details, so I'm going to be peppering in my stories about your chart, my explanations with a lot of backstory. If at any time, let's say they are really crazy in the variables, okay? Or you got left variables even. I know you have questions. Anytime you have a question, this is what I say. Anytime you have a question, feel free to interrupt me if you need to ask something, if you don't understand. Because if they don't understand and you don't give them that permission to ask you, what happens? Quiet. They don't say anything. You get a 3 or 4 hour session later and they go, you know, that doesn't really look like my chart. Or maybe a week later, you get an email that says, that wasn't my chart. Okay, so how do we make sure that we don't do that mistake? Lavina's done it, okay? You have either a system in place, a process They input in their own data. So they give you a link from My Body Graph. That's the safest way because they're giving you their chart. And then at the beginning, or if you get an order, you send them a link and you say, is that your chart? And they say yes. And then at the beginning of the analysis, you say their birth data, say their birth data. Now, by telling them, I'm going to say again what it is. What are we doing here? How is it going to go? What kind of thing is going to happen? What's expected of them? How can they relate to it? How you are going to relate it to them? What that does at the same time is it defines your role in relationship with them, what you expect them to do in the reading. So you expect, now release expectations. However, they probably want to know their place as in what they can and cannot do. Can I ask questions? If they start to get really uncomfortable and they start like writing down questions or like making notes, and you see that they're a right-facing variable, and they're trying to take down notes, you might, because what happens when that happens is they're going to not be able to pay full attention. They're trying to take out notes because they have a problem with thinking that they can't remember everything. So you let them know right away. This is going to be recorded so that you can listen back to it again. And if they're emotional or any kind of split, I say, it would be nice if you could listen to this again before you send me any follow-up questions that you might have. Okay, so it lets them off the hook of the pressure and stress. A lot of people save up months for a really good analysis reading. If you think about the hourly wages in different places of the world, our job looks like, oh, it's only an hour. How come you're charging so much money? Because it takes a lot of time, energy to be able to not only advertise, market, put yourself out there, handle all your taxes and all of your expenses, but also you have to study that chart. And generally speaking, what I found, it was 5 hours in the beginning when I first started this. 5 hours of studying and preparing and putting together presentations. It is not easy in the beginning. It doesn't take me 5 hours anymore to prepare for an analysis because now I know what I'm doing. But it took years to get to that point where I could cut that in half and an assistant to help me prepare. Okay, so it's doing yourself and the client a good service if you study the chart beforehand. Obviously, as you go through the exam, you're going to put in a lot of hours. You're going to be surprised at how many hours you put into a 30-minute to 45-minute session. That's it. Your final exam. You're going to put in tons of hours. It's going to surprise you. It's going to shock you. You're going to be like, do I really even want to do this work? You will if you like studying and you love working with people. You will do the work. Now, if you don't study, can you still take them through living their design as an awakening experience and skate on by with very general? Yeah, you can. However, is that really a foundation analysis? I would say no. I would say no. Foundation analysis, type, strategy, authority. No specificity. Personally, for me, I prefer detail. I prefer synthesis and actually seeing the linkages in somebody's chart. Now, what if you feel like you can't do that? That's okay. Go simple, go easy. Do what you can, pass your exam, okay? If I see any places I can help you improve or ask or elicit information from you to flesh things out a little bit, I will. Like, if, for example, you've got somebody who's got strong individuality and you never mention the word melancholy, they're going to dock you for that. They're not going to like that. You have to remember the full ramifications of what this person is here for. Melancholy, sadness, mutation, empowerment, creativity, all of those wonderful keynotes that you've already learned how to use. Once you've gone through all of this stuff, you're going to summarize. So what have we done here? What have we learned? How, when we get to the conclusion, how we've woven the thread of profile through the entirety of the analysis. Because if you don't do that, you're missing opportunities to weave the element of their life purpose fulfillment into the entirety of the chart. So lots of different places for recognition or response or awareness or whatever it happens to be, depending on their design particulars, their profile, their public role. So we give them examples of profile of our own or of others to illustrate what might happen to them. Not just profile, but type, strategy, and authority too, if you have extra time. Maybe you don't do it so much in the exam, but when you're doing this work, I'm doing two things here as we go through these next 2 months. Is one, I want you to pass your exam and you work on your own exam. Make sure that you get your exam worked on during classes or between the weeks, because if you don't, you won't be able to come and ask questions for mentoring during the weeks, that we're together. Second thing is pass your exam. So how do we do an analysis? Pass the exam. And how do we do the work? That's when I'm threading in little stories of my personal experience, because that's how Lavina teaches. So it's up for their authority to decide how the design particulars you're giving relates to them. So it's very helpful to allow their experience to be what it is. And if you notice that they're coming from a place of frustration, anger, bitterness, disappointment, what you can do is soften. Because if you meet that with frustration, anger, bitterness, and disappointment of your own, it's not going to go anywhere. So we can't meet them where they're at when it comes to their frequency level. If we did, we wouldn't go anywhere. We have to come from this different place of authenticity, sweetness, satisfaction, peace, surprise, whatever it happens to be for you. So wrapping up that summation after profile of how everything works, synthesizing everything with the profile, how that works in the world, whatever examples that will help. If they're not cooperating with their design, their nature, how is it that they're going to get messed up? That's, remember, just a reminder, go back to what is the frustration principle for this generator? How is it going to show up? How might they feel it? Like physically, how might they feel it? You might notice that, and then you're holding your breath, or you got a queasy in the pit of your stomach or something like that. And that's coming from design particulars in the design. So if you're having problems with that still, go back to foundations, because I gave you lots of information. There's rave cartography where I'm repeating live lectures. If you'd like to attend silently or via recording, just take a look if you need refresh. So we start with what we are going to say, and then we say, and then at the end, we sum up what we have just said and invite them into the experiment. So the journey in 2, 3, and 4, definition, transition, openness. This is really detailed so that what we can do in a foundation analysis in a very short time doesn't necessarily overwhelm the client, but it does give them preciseness rather than general stuff they can find on My Body Graph or any of the YouTube videos that are out there. We want specificity to them. Everybody's going through overwhelmingly trying to get all the details before the age of details is over. The time of heretics is long gone. The first line era, this is it. We're going into 6. So people want the big picture. Already you're seeing that. They want to go to somebody who is walking their talk, is doing the work, or knows what they're talking about. They want your perspective on their chart because you're the professional. If you can't give them the specificity without overwhelming them, if you give them the specificity without overwhelming them, then what happens is good analysis. They walk away happy. But if you can't give them the specificity and you do overwhelm them, then they walk away confused and they're still frustrated, angry, bitter, disappointed potentially. Now, again, that's not necessarily always on you. It may be 5 years later, they listen to their analysis and they've been studying in the meantime. Now they get it. Now they're like, holy crap, I'm really getting a lot out of this reading. Thank you very much. They write you, they give you glowing testimonial. Wonderful. So just experimenting with demonstrating how you are going to say what you want to say in the briefest way in your homework assignments, okay? When you're done with your brief pieces, that you're not writing a book, 30 to 45 minutes. When you're done with them, then fill it out, add more details. Having a reading that's simple and direct and around 30 minutes is the aim, maximum 45. Is that possible? Yes. Can you do it? Maybe. But here's the requirements of what you're going to want to make sure that you are including in a more broken out way. Deep respect for your client, meaning we're not talking down to them. We're seeing them as a partner, collaborator, companion along the journey that's just a little bit further behind than we. Maybe it's only 3.5 years. Maybe you're 6 or 7 or 10 years into your experience. Whatever the case, ensuring that you respect them and make sure that you're respected in return. You get somebody who is constantly not showing up, start charging ahead of time. Okay, that's what Lavina had to do. Or you start doing free strategy sessions and they go on and people take advantage of you. Lavina thought to take advantage. No, you're just too kind and you're giving them all the answers and then they never book a session because they got what they wanted anyway. Stop doing free analysis sessions or free coaching sessions. That isn't the only way to get to know people, okay? Don't blame them for you not being able to have strong boundaries and saying no. Lavina had to learn that from the hard way. Okay, showing respect in your own way, whatever that happens to be for you in context with your client. Don't let them trespass your boundaries or walk all over you. Everything in human design that was said by Ra was said based on the energetics of the body graph itself. So when the energy is moving through the body graph, we either have pressure, potential awareness, possible expression, or expression within the context of streams. Make sure you're speaking to that. Or you have pressure, response, identity, and expression. Those are the ways that we can have energy move through the body graph. So ensure that you're following the energetic flow, entering into, bringing things back to, everything being about that person being their own authority. So bring it all back to the body graph with your own body graph mechanical knowledge that you learned from Ra. Not to repeat what he said, but based on your own personal experience, or maybe people that you've known because you don't have experience with the integration channel, the whole shebang, find out some information. Before you do an analysis, if you look at a chart and you see that that person is so foreign from you, you might have a really hard time trying to explain. I remember I focused solely on projectors for so many years that when I got manifestors in, it would be really hard for me to change my language. And if you don't know, let's say you don't have a lot of experience with manifestors or generators or reflectors or projectors, whatever it is, see if you can go back to either the recordings, which is why I give you lots of study groups and such, so you can hear from other people, or ask somebody who is that person's type. Get some your own data in, go research into your books. Do not go into a reading cold, and don't try to do this cold either. Get your backstory, get your details, use your synthesis language. We're going to want to see, again, remember, base your work on the body graph. We're wanting to see you demonstrate your presentation skills. You need to practice these because just one reading of the chart is not going to nail it. You're going to want to read it probably 2 or 3 times. Reading your analysis before you nail it, before it feels natural, doesn't feel forced or like you're reading. You don't stutter. You don't make mistakes. Read it several times out loud so you can hear it for yourself before you submit your first recording to me. Okay? Include all items on the checklist. There's a separate video that shows the checklist that you might have already watched in this particular section. If not, it's homework for this week. Remember that items on the checklist, if you miss one, we're going to have to ask you to go back and put it in. It's all of this brief to the point. When it comes to Ra, he named everything for you. You don't have to make up anything. You just have to research and explain it. Gates, channels, centers, lines, it's all there. That's why it's called a reading. It's different from astrology work because astrology is based heavily on what kind of school you went to and your interpretation. Human design is a logical framework that doesn't require you to be special at interpreting a chart. You read the analysis work, okay? No distractions. I remember listening to a self-taught who was also teaching other analysts, and he was promoting himself in one of my Facebook groups like 5 years ago. I went and listened to his analysis, and basically he was teaching the client about gates, but not synthesizing nor making it specific about what their chart was saying. So he was telling stories based on raw stories and not really being very clear. Brief, synthesize to the point. Don't get distracted by, oh, this is the gate of divorce. Are you in a divorce or whatever? Go into surface. Type, strategy, and authority is the most important thing. You must include the red and black formats and details. And you're going to do that primarily in the synthesis between definition and openness. Okay, that's in between, the segue, I should say, the segue. When you portray conditioning, as in not knowing when enough is enough, or trying to speak when you really haven't been asked or invited or recognized or whatever the case may be, you're trying to attract attention. That is a mechanical, conditioned, adaptive strategy of the mind that you can touch upon briefly and then bring them back home to how would they resolve it mechanically. If a sacral generator, wait for a response, wait to be asked. And this is not about invitation. Asking and invitation are two very different things. If you need me to resolve that, please let me know after the lecture so that I can. No stupid questions. I want to make sure everybody's very clear. You're grounding in the body graph mechanics very clearly. The first 3 views, type, strategy, and authority. You present this to them so that, and it's in the beginning especially, so that they are oriented to how to decide. That's the most important thing. Ross synthesized, created type, strategy, and authority in order for people to know what to do, because he did years and years of detailed readings and they still didn't know what to do. He thought it was obvious. So we simplified everything, dumbed it down. If they've already had an overview reading, you don't have to do that in such a deep way. Here in this analysis, assuming this person is brand new, you're going to need to explain what a response is or what a recognition is. Do not forget recognition in context with projector, because it's not just about the invitation. Recognition is a two-way street. So you have to address that specifically to them. When you find details that can illustrate what to explain, because the client doesn't necessarily know these words in context, like practical examples for somebody who is a 5, you're going to be able to help that client understand, not just saying keynotes. This is not about dancing around and listing all the keynotes for gate 49 or whatever gate it is that their personality sun is in, because you want to give it a really good, understanding. It's not an analysis for their incarnation cross. So don't get too caught up in, let's say, flowery or expansive words that just sound really cool. Simple, effective, profound, deep. The details and right timing is going to help, through your authority, bring forth the verbal articulatory skill that lands the reading for the client. So how are you going to do that? Speak to their nature. Remember how I would teach you in coaching by design, what I found in my experimental process? When it comes to speaking to their nature, you use the keynotes of whatever channels they have, or whatever you're at, wherever you're at in context, you use the keynotes of empowerment, support, or sharing from whatever context that is. Try to get it into them to see what you're saying or grasp what you're talking about, whatever the case may be. When you're including red and black formats and details, remember, half of the details, the orientation in the chart, are unconscious. So if it makes more definition unconscious than conscious, there is going to be a bit of a challenge for you to help them self-recognize. So let's say they're generative. You might ask them, has anyone ever told you, and then describe the unconscious channel? Or has anybody ever accused you of, and then describe the unconscious channel? Remember what happens when somebody is operating out of integrity. Their unconscious channels, whether it be red and black, fully red with a partial black, or red and black, like as in full overpass. There are aspects that are going to condition their mind, and when they're not operating correctly, their mind running the show is going to show up with the definition showing up in an unhealthy way. So people getting their thyroids removed, or people really burned out adrenally because they're doing too much, because they're not taking their time and going slowly or carefully or whatever is right for them. Because the unconscious is the whole reason for an energetic strategy, if amplified and distorted by the own person's mind, that leads them into frustration, anger, bitterness, and disappointment. By revealing the principles of that in a very simple way, here's what you do, or here's what's true, or can you experiment with, however it is. You're going to inform the manifester. You're going to ask generators laser focused questions. You're going to recognize and invite the projectors. And for the reflectors, well, you're just aliens, Lisa, and we just don't know what to do with you. So that's why you have to get really good at this and tell us what for. Just kidding. Your analysis work is very different and more synthesis and education as far as what you're doing with the lunar cycle, right? So when we go to the energetic level, when you're speaking to somebody's unconscious, it means below conscious awareness. So they're not consciously aware of this, but you're speaking to their form. That might take time for it to land with them. That means then this access that you're giving them to a whole other level of body consciousness, it may take some time for them to align to that. And it's not like we have to do it in one session. It's unreasonable to think that you can wake somebody up in one session. You can change their life, but it has to do with them doing the work, not what you told them to do. So be very careful about taking power and that I know better than you stance. It's not helpful, and it's not healthy for you to take on their decision-making process. They are responsible for being their own authority. So the whole part of them being unconscious at first, by the end, the idea is, let's say we're again working with a sacral generator. Many of them are going to be pure sacral generator. What you might be able to do by the end is get them in response and then be able to point it out to them. So at the end, you say something like, Ra, he would say, listen back to the recording. You know, the one making the funny noises? That's you. Okay, that's Ra's way. I just asked them at the end, could you listen to the recording and listen for, pay attention to when you hear that guttural response, that or really pay attention to what you hear yourself non-verbally affirm or deny, and then go back and listen to what I just said, because that's the most important thing, your response mechanism, the nonverbal, okay, with that kind of person. And you want to try and do that for everybody. So guess what? Easy enough. Half the population being emotional, you just ask them to listen to it again at a later date, once they've had some time to process, sleep on it, and come back to it. And if they need to, left-facing mind. Take notes, they can pause the recording. It brings some of the stress off if if you tell them so, hey, from the beginning, remember, hey, don't worry, because they got a totally open head ashna, right-facing variable. Don't worry about trying to take down every note or remember everything that I say. We've got the recording. Make sure you do double recording. I always ask the client to hit record on that side, unless they happen to be in transit. Sometimes people are on the phone or whatever, and what to do. It is what it is. I usually tell them, I'm happy to reschedule so that you're not waiting in the car to pick up your kids, or waiting at the car repair place, or driving. I mean, not making this up. People pay hundreds of dollars, and then sometimes they're not there for their analysis. I email them and say, hey, I'm waiting in the room for you. And they show up and go, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I forgot what to do. Give them the space so that they don't get all stressed. Because I'm sensitive. I don't know about you, but if somebody else is sensitive, if somebody else is driving, I'm worried for them. I wouldn't want to get an analysis while I'm driving. So yeah, that's just me. So the observance, okay, mental awareness, conscious, design, particulars, unconscious, and the observance of the body principle, the form differentiation, synthesizing that into the process of observing. You're explaining the observer, the witness passenger consciousness in context with that human being's body principle, and the unity, type, strategy, and authority. The unity helps them get in context with their life. So you may have to simplify your words. You may have heard me with different people who say, I don't know what you're talking about. And then we slow down and we get real simple and we take it one step at a time. Any pure sacral generators out there, emotional or not, more splits, the longer it's going to take for them to gel or synthesize. Just slow down and go very, very simply, not too quickly. Okay, they're going to be listening to how quickly you deliver the reading. Are you delivering it in such a way that the person's going to be able to understand? So be very clear, enunciate. I keep doing that. Enunciate your words clearly. And if at the end you've got too many words, maybe you repeat it again, or you can cut out some sections and speed it up slightly. That's what I did. I did so much. Oh, might have overdone it, but there you have it. It is what it is. Okay, so the reason why they're getting a reading from you is because this is confusing to them. If they were clear and understood everything, they won't necessarily be there. Except in rare instances, Lavina gets these a lot, where somebody comes and wants to tell them, her, they, whoever they are, tell her their entire life story and how much they studied and no, and they just have one question. And that's okay too. That's it. That is what it is. That's why I keep coaching around for people like that. So they want explanations. They want justifications, rationalizations, reasons. And if you can help them get out of mental reasons and get in touch with authentic alignment, you're more likely that they're going to want to come back to you. Because one reading, it's not a one and done business. And to do this work, if you try to do it as a one and done business, you are going to burn yourself out, because it takes a lot of new people into your practice if you're going to do a one and done business. You've got so many different ways to be able to help them. Not only an individual session, the partnership sessions, which you can do with everybody in their family or important people, family, friends. Annual cycle, the yearly cycle is the most important one outside of their individual rave analysis. If you're an LYD guide, take them through LYD guide, LYD with their clients, or your clients, their family, friends. You can do a coaching program. That's what I recommend at minimum. Then you have your larger life cycles that they may be going through, but they might not be going through that right then and there. So you do all this foundational work so that annually you give them an analysis, you give them their cycles when they're ready, when it's right for them. And that way you build a sustainable practice. If you just say, I'm a human design analyst, and expect people to come to you by hanging out your shingle, you're going to be sorely disappointed. So get some help from someone like Mari. She's got lots of wonderful courses and materials to help you support getting your practice full. Because in this day and age, you just have to put in the work. And that is something that you have to do because it's lighting you up inside, because you like to do it. So find your way forward. And someone like Mari, who is specializing in helping people can help point you in the right direction. Okay, so they are going to love hearing from you the why or wherefores of why things keep happening, why there are these things repeating as a pattern. So when you go and look at the chart, we can do that later if there's no questions. We look at a chart, I'll show you where I start to look in order to assess and prepare for an analysis. So this is one of those things that you're going to want to do regularly on a regular basis to practice so that you get good at being able to do the work if you don't have clients quite yet. Start building your repertoire or your database of famous raves and put your work out there as an example. Because if you don't hang out your shingle and put out your work as an example, how are people going to know who you are or what you do? You have to do something. So that's an example. Transits are another example. Okay, so what is it that is creating the dilemma? Remember the conditioning, the dilemmas, the design dilemmas for that person in their design to work through type, strategy, and authority, being their own authority. That was a long one, but that's a lot. Okay. There's 2 ways to go through this class. There are additional assignments that you can do as practice. So if you've got all the time, you are working on really honing your skills, I recommend you do the homework and the assignments, like your final exams, of course, absolutely. But if you're not, you don't have a lot of time and you're pretty confident in your skills, like Mari, you've been through BG5 too, so I don't think that you have to go through the detailed level of the assignments unless you really want to. You can just work on your final exam. Depending on what you want out of this course, you're going to get out of it, how much time and energy you put into it, obviously. But some people are way more at beginner level, relatively, comparatively speaking, because they haven't been doing any of the work. They are not a Living Your Design guide. They're not a BG5 consultant. That's a very different story from somebody who is and has been repeating classes over and over and over again, like Mari does, as well as from different teachers out there. So just use your own authority. Please don't use me as an excuse. Lavina told me to and I can't. You have to be able to take what resonates and leave the rest if you're going to be your own authority. This checklist for the final exam submission includes the following components that, again, 30 to 45 minutes. They're not going to want to see it longer than that. I have seen people put it in a little bit longer. What to do? I asked him to make it shorter and they still passed it anyway, even though it went a few minutes over. But I would try to keep it to 45. If you live in the States, America, Genoa is a stickler on this. He's a stickler on this, okay? Basics to be covered. Again, type. Mention their type. Strategy. Explain the strategy. Authority. Discuss their authority for decision-making based on their definition and profile. Provide an understanding of their profile lines and how they operate. That's at the core, the core. If they are brand new to this work, when you do this work out there in the world, my suggestion has always been an overview first, or when I got too busy, and this was a long time ago that I got too busy and didn't want to keep repeating myself, I just sent them a link to my bodygraph.com and said, here, look, the first step is free. Like literally, you get a free account on my bodygraph. I sent them their own link. They could claim their link as theirs, create their own account, and read the materials that are there. But separately, if you want to nurture this person along the way, type, strategy, and authority first. And then when they come in, you can do more of an expansive analysis. Again, that's out in the real world. Here, you want short 45 minutes to cover this stuff. So too many times I've seen people in this class who know better. I've taught it 3 times now. You'll see that people try to go into teacher mode, not analyst mode, because Lavina is teacher. So don't model after me, do you. And 2, do this homework, the body graph, describe the components of the body graph as an outline of a person, the 9 centers, briefly describe the 9 centers, Channels, explain the geographical representation of the channels in the body graph and the purpose of the centers. Discuss the role of centers as gathering places for specific information and energy. Now, that doesn't mean that you go through and list. You see the red triangle on the right side of the body graph? Okay, you look down at that person's body graph. Their triangle is white. You don't label the colors of the centers accordingly to the general, the book. Don't label them like this, okay? So you're going to have to look at the chart and say, okay, you see this tiny little white triangle over here? That's your heart center. You don't do living your design, just saying. And you would think that that would be obvious, but obviously it's not. Otherwise, I wouldn't be correcting it. Homework 2. You're going to help them understand their authority for decision-making, meaning identify how their client, their definition, creates them being able to access their own authority to make the right decision at the right time. How does it operate? Is it tribal? Is it individual? Or is it collective? Because each one of those are going to operate differently. And then again, remember, you're not going to mention it now, but you're going to look at the formats. And if you see a format channel or a gate activation, then you know this person's tribal wave operates on an off-on pulse, okay? Because they've got also the 63, or they just got the 3. It's still going to affect how they function. So you have to synthesize, even though you might not literally point and say, oh, because of this, you have that. No, you're going to use the right keynotes. And when you get to that section, which is a segue section between definition and openness, then you highlight the presence of splits and formats, okay? Splits and formats go in between in your very well organized analysis between definition and openness. So there's the transition format homework. Gates. Discuss the impact of the format gates on the energy of the whole chart. Remember, it goes to the energy of the whole chart. Adrenalized, bitterness this person might have, whatever the case may be. Channels in the centering or in the defense circuit, those channels and those circuits affect the design's operation. If you recall from rave cartography or your analyst work, it does. Very powerful, the defense circuit, as well as the centering circuit. So you're going to want to make sure that you express that somewhere, wherever it's right for you. Generally, when it comes to transition, unique aspects that really influence a lot of things, because they might influence things on the openness as well as the definition. And your homework red and black, you're analyzing the unconscious activation. How does that person's strategy and authority resolve difficulties arising from unconscious activation? How would it show up? In the openness, we have the intelligence of being nurtured by life when you operate from your nature. So there's a potential for awareness wherever that person is open. One can be aware of the mental pressure that is there or physical pressure. One can be aware of the mental process of trying to make sense of things, the openness that is particularly vulnerable. Yeah, when we get to the activations that are there, what is it that is turning on by the conditioned field of either being with people or being in a transit situation? You don't explain that in detail. You just make sure that you're addressing it. What do we do about the challenges? Go back to the authority. So remember how we did keynote weaving, where you're alternating back and forth. If this, then go back to this, yeah? Problem solution kind of energy. The dilemma in the openness is where you do this primarily. And homework number 3, explain the pain and the gift associated with the client's open centers. And the impact and the definition, how does that definition make it so that the priority of the decisions in the not self show up. So as an example, Lavina's got a defined emotional system, got an open splenic center, open sacral, open heart. Okay, of those three, which is the one that has the most pull? It's going to be my sacral, because that's where my incarnation cross gates are. And I've got a lot of other gates there too. So then there's going to be this, gut response attempt to get rid of the pressure or stress or the fear by taking spontaneous action. That emotional system is the solution, by slowing things down, by waiting out the wave, by taking one's time. So the strategy and authority helps us deal with dilemmas. This is the thing that we want to get across in however many ways, shapes, or forms we can explain it. Try to use different keynotes if you've already repeated yourself repeatedly on one particular set. So as an example, for a sacral generator, available to respond, energetic response, wait to be asked, wait for the energy to appear. Those are all different ways of saying the same things in order to make it clear. So be very specific with that person's chart dynamics. Again, remember to put it into context. Homework number 4 is going to be profile, a brief understanding of their lines and their operation. I might have already told it to you, but this is the book that I highly, highly recommend. Type and Profile Reference Book. If you get this, you're less likely to make any mistakes, because this is really helpful and valuable in doing the work with people, not just for your exam, but doing the work. I wish I'd have known about it earlier. I only found out about it a couple years ago, the book, I only bought it a couple years ago. Okay. You're going to discuss their style of interacting with the world through their profile. How does that lead them to interact? Are they going to be shy? Are they going to be bold? Whatever it is that their design is. And what challenges that difficulty of that person's profile is going to show up with if the client operates out of integrity with themselves. So the heretic who starts to operate like a hermit and never wants to get out there or meet new strangers. A 5-1 will never fulfill their life's work if they don't constantly, pertaining to the chart, or continually come into contact with strangers. If they're hermiting and they never go out and they're deathly afraid to have anybody over, they're not going to make new stranger friends. Every time I hear danger, because stranger danger. Every time I say the word stranger, and I have to go, no, that's not the right word. Okay, challenges, we discussed that. Now again, with the 6 line, whatever 6 line it happens to be, a 6-2, 6-3, or a 4-6, you want to make sure that you talk about the different phases of that client's life process. Yeah, the 3-part life process. And in your summary, type, definition, and authority. When you emphasize the importance of these 3 elements throughout the reading, you're taking that opportunity to ensure that you're doing the work of an analyst. And the true self statement is a concise statement that you create that wraps all the previous components together and gives the client a new perspective on themselves. So you can do this again, like I mentioned, in several different ways. Find your way that works for you. You might just make an outline really quick, like gathering your keynotes. Remember from Rave, ABCs, and cartography? Gather your keynotes together and then write out brief sentences. And then maybe you do some wild mind writing on what you see or know or have experienced. And then you compress to the essence. How can you make it so refined and so precise and so simple? May not be easy, but this is the work. Your overall assessment of this exam is they're going to be grading you on technique. So the most important thing, if your reading is not well organized, synthesized, and effectively transmitted, meaning it's all over the place, you are lifting text up from slides or books, and you're not actually putting it into context, not going to do a good job. Okay? You're just not. So try to create original work. In the presentation, you want to demonstrate confidence in the voice. Go look on YouTube, find some speaking videos if you feel uncomfortable speaking. Lavina had to do that for years in order to learn how to effectively communicate, not just with your words that you're saying, even though you're not including a video. They don't want a video, they just want the audio. What you're going to do is make sure that you're using your whole body to communicate. You know how Lavina uses her whole body to communicate? Even if you're doing an audio recording, try to allow the energy to flow in your body. Put the smile on that is, coming from an authentic place. It's going to sound different to your client. You can hear it when I start to smile, energy projector, what to do. But make sure that you're using your instrument, this voice, because it is, the work that you do is with the voice, in correctness, like in alignment. And then in presentation, according to the human design standards, which is clarity and accuracy and synthesis, I would say. Clarity, accuracy, synthesis. The checklist is based on the information given in the homework document in your course materials area, which is provided by the IHDS. I have not messed with it. It's from the IHDS, so you can trust that you need to follow that. And then any additional requirements specific to the final exam submission will be provided separately from your document, okay? So you get a document, you fill out all of that stuff, you turn in your MP3, and then there's the images of the client's chart, your chart, which you'll also put at the top of the document with birth dates. And then the last thing is the proof that you have paid your exam fee for them to review it for you. Okay, so how is that landing with you?